What do you want to build your next year's body out of?
I can tell you something. If you eat carbohydrates, it doesn't mean that it's going to be made out of carbohydrates, right? It's going to be made out of essential proteins, essential amino acids, and fatty acids, right? No matter what you eat. Okay, folks, welcome to another reaction video. I have to keep making these because people keep saying stuff that is demonstrably false on the interwebs. This is our dear friend and special guest of the channel from time to time, Dr. Michael Greger. Let's see what he has to say this time.
Every day, 50 billion of our cells die, and 50 billion cells are born.
True, but when you say these numbers, it doesn't give any context, right? How many trillions of cells are in the human body? How many of those are human cells versus non-human cells? So giving context would be nice, but I know this is just the hook.
By the end of the year, we have replaced our entire body weight worth of cells. What do you want to build your next year's body out of?
I can tell you something. If you eat carbohydrates, it doesn't mean that it's going to be made out of carbohydrates, right? It's going to be made out of essential proteins, essential amino acids, and fatty acids, right? No matter what you eat. It's just a question of whether, do you want to make life easier by actually eating the proteins and fats, or do you want to make life more difficult by eating things that the body has to turn into those proteins and fats? Choice is yours, I suppose. But the implication of what he just said is that you should really be eating a lot of protein and fat. So I don't know if he meant to say that, but that's the implication.
Data shows just how much ultra-processed food we're eating.
55% of Americans' food intake. An alarming nutrition reality.
The number one killer now is actually your diet. We are killing ourselves.
Every day, your body's fighting a life and death battle for you. You're not even aware of it.
How do you kind of maintain sanity, I guess?
Yeah, try to do that.
Dr. Michael Greger is a...
This guy talking about maintaining sanity is kind of funny. I don't know. He just doesn't strike me as particularly mentally balanced when he speaks. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm certainly not qualified to give that diagnosis, but let's see.
World-renowned longevity expert
who's dedicated his career to studying the science of nutrition.
Through his best-selling books and evidence-based research,
It's inspired millions around the world to redefine healthy aging.
Right, my favorite food in the world turns out terrible. It's neurotoxins.
Hey, I can always be healthier, I can always improve, but I also don't want this to become all-consuming.
Yeah, you have no idea how bad it can be. When we're watching Netflix, our body's like got a billion things. It's got a to-do list, a million things long. It's like, holy shit, I gotta keep them alive. I'm like, okay, this is cool. The data is remarkable. Yeah. Right? It's like whatever you want to do in life, you need your health, right? I can help you with the health part, right?
Can you though? I don't know, man. Yeah, just looking at how this guy presents, yeah, I think I'd like to listen. Looks aren't everything, appearance isn't everything, but as a rule, like if I have a doctor who's obese, and I have in my life taken advice from doctors who are obese, now I think about it. Now I'm like, dude, you don't seem to know what you're doing for your own health. Why should I listen to you exactly? So this, of course, is at the other end of the, I don't know what we're going to call him, skinny fat, sarcopenic. I don't know what we're going to call him, but he's not looking particularly, he doesn't present as a particularly healthy person. Let me put it that way.
Now, I mean, no one will say, oh, I just want to lie in bed in pain all day. If someone actually said that to me, then I'm like, oh, well, I got nothing for you.
So I'd love to walk through a full day of eating for Dr. Greger. And I know there's a long list. We talked about it briefly yesterday, but I'd really love to get into some of the details. What do you eat on a daily basis? And if there are any particular ones that you want to highlight, why do you eat those foods?
Yeah, I mean, so kind of the broad view is, is the aspirational daily dozen, right? That's the, my book, How Not to Die, came out 10 years ago. We got the 10th anniversary edition.
And has the death rate changed at all? Like, are you stopping people from dying? Yeah.
Updated, coming out December 2025. And, the first half of the book is just 15 chapters, each of 15 leading causes of death. Talking about the world diet. Maybe preventing, arresting, reversing our top 15 killers. I didn't want it to just be a reference book, but a practical day-to-day grocery store style guide to actually, how to incorporate this into your daily life. And so that was the traffic light system, and then the daily dozen, which is like, all the healthiest of healthy foods. I encourage people to fit into their daily routine.
Healthiest of healthy foods. What does that mean exactly? How do you know that a food is healthy or unhealthy?
So not just like fruits and vegetables, specifically berries every day.
How do we know that fruits and vegetables and berries every day? Like I live in an area, A, where humans evolved, and B, where there are berries from the trees. And if you eat the wrong berry in the wrong season, you're not going to be alive for very, very long, right? Some of these things are hugely toxic. So if your proposal is that, hybridized, genetically modified, however you want to define it, foods that have only really become edible in the past 100, 200, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 years if you're talking about something like broccoli, or 2,000 years if you're talking about something like broccoli. Foods that have only been able to be consumed by humans relatively recently, those are the healthy foods? Like, where's the evidence for that, right?
The healthiest fruits, dark green leafies, cruciferous, the healthiest vegetables, a tablespoon of ground flaxseed, quarter teaspoon of turmeric, the best beverages, how much exercise, etc., like that. Just to kind of inspire people to, something to go for. And of course, it's available a free app, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. And people can kind of track their progress and remind, oh, I didn't have my flax today, or oh, should I eat more beans, or whatever. And so that.
Yeah, beans are another story. If you eat raw beans, it can be fatal in some cases. There's a case of someone, it's a long ago case of children eating, I think, 9 uncooked or undercooked kidney beans, and one of them died. Some of them had to be sent to the hospital. Like, it was a very serious food poisoning case. So yeah, be careful when you're considering these foods as healthy, like for whom, under what circumstances, right?
That's really kind of the framework. And then it's like, well, yeah, but those are like individual, like how do you actually make meals? And so people kept asking, so I started this series of cookbooks, How Not to Die cookbook, How Not to Diet cookbook, and then How Not to Age cookbook just came out in April.
First of all, just the name of the book is just so stupid, right? Like there is, and this is here where I maybe disagree with some of the healthcare influencers of Brian Johnson, some of these people. Like, there's 2 things that are guaranteed in the world, like to quote a very old expression, right? Death and taxes. And death isn't going, if anything, taxes, man, you will have a much easier time getting out of paying your income tax than you will have of not dying. I promise you. Like, this is just part of being part of the terms of the terms and conditions, ladies and gentlemen, the terms and conditions for being on this planet. You were born, and one day you will die. Yeah. So yeah, if someone writes a book called How Not to Die, like, don't even pick it up. Like, it just seems so stupid.
I think my favorite of the 3. And so then it's like, oh, okay, so here's all the Daily Dozen foods, and in the particular, so these are a lot of the anti-aging foods too, like purple sweet potatoes and stuff.
Purple sweet potatoes are anti-aging. Okay. What? How? Right? What's the evidence for that?
To add those new wacky ingredients that, I mentioned for longevity. How do you actually make tasty meals for your family with them? In my own life, I eat kind of much more simply. And when I'm at home, control of my life, there's, I was going to say privileged to live alone, but it's not a privilege. I mean, I have control of my life in a way that if you have a family, it's not easy to not have chips in the house if you had teenagers or whatever. But look, you could lock them away in a safe, give them the key, and then let them eat the chips, whatever. But I mean, I have kind of total control over what's in the house. And so there's no junk in the house. So I just got no junk. No like special occasion junk, just no junk. So if I get hungry, I might eat an apple because that's the best I got, right? If I had apples and a cookie, then, a couple first few days, I'll white knuckle it and eat that apple. But, I have a bad day or whatever, some stressful thing, I'd eat that cookie. But there's no go.
Well, occasionally, I guess this guy says useful information, very occasionally. Listen, it's a good idea to not keep things in your house that you wouldn't have on your meal plan, whatever it is, right? Whether they're cookies, whether it's bread, whatever it may be. If you can keep it out of the house, that is better.
Okay, so you control your environment. And look, I'm blessed to be able to work at home. I have to walk past a donut shop every day, or there's not some, bowl of chocolates on my, desk next to me or whatever. And so I have control. And so then it's easy to eat healthy because healthy's your only option. You either don't.
The funny thing is, it would be easy for him to eat healthy, but he's choosing to eat in a way that, gives him whatever problems he's currently suffering from. Yeah, don't know what to say about that.
Eat or eat healthy. And so there you go. So, and then it's like, I'm so busy that it's just, anything I can make super simple, super quick, a lot of batch cooking. So, I can, cook You know, a lot of people batch cook for the week, but you got a freezer. You can batch cook for a month, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, this is how much, you know, if I'm going to,
You can do this, but if you're sensitive to histamines, probably not a great idea. And I think more people are sensitive to histamines than we currently know or than are diagnosed with such. So yeah, okay. If you're storing stuff in the freezer for a month or for a couple months, could be fine. Especially if whatever that is going to be well cooked. But yeah, in general, if you find that you're not thriving on that, maybe try fresher meat, fresher eggs, fresher whatever it is that you're eating. Don't store them in the freezer for too long if it's not suiting you. Again, it works for some people, not going to work for everybody.
eat this kind of food, you know, if this is a really good breakfast every morning, if I don't get sick of it, well, then just make a month worth of that thing and just warm it up. And, use microwave a lot. You know, my freezer is half frozen greens, half frozen berries. I'm thankfully with Instacart, and, you know, I can get, you know, produce delivered. I use air fryer a lot, as a quick, easy way.
Yeah, air fryer is great.
And anything that, you know, that has a timer so I don't burn things because they get lost in my work and whatever. It's like, okay, 10 minutes.
I can relate to that.
Oh, you know, you got something on the stove, I'm going to burn the house down. You know, I can't, you know. And
I don't understand how you can be vegan and not be a good cook. Like, when I went vegan, like the first few months was like training myself how to be an excellent cook, because otherwise, how can you eat anything at all, right? It's just the food is so unappetizing. I mean, people can say the same about almost any food. But I think if you're not vegan, then there's all kinds of options. You know, you can run to the store, you can get stuff, ready-made stuff. Once you become a very strict vegan, as I think this guy is, right? You have to learn how to be, I think, an excellent chef is what I would say. Just from the community that I was part of, I don't think there was anyone who wasn't a very good chef, right? Or a very good cook.
And much of it is like to my particular taste. And so I'm always hesitant to kind of like talk about exactly what I eat, because people are like, oh, I got to eat that.
Yeah.
Only if you really enjoy it. Like, you know, it's like, it's like, oh, well, Gregor puts hot sauce on everything, so I better put hot sauce. Well, no, I only do it because I like the hot sauce. You know what I mean? But, you know, for people who are interested, usually for me, breakfast, kind of warm months, I do smoothies, and then the cold months, I do this kind of, you know, the bro bowl, which is, you know, groats, you know, barley groats, oat groats, rye groats, and lentils, which I make big batches of.
My God, this guy's digestion must be absolutely miserable. I mean, wow.
And then, you know, add lots of berries, nuts and seeds, and cocoa, and, you know, whatever else I want to kind of.
Man, this guy's giving me flashbacks to my vegan days, and man, I'm so glad I don't eat like that anymore. First of all, just the time having to think about 6-7 different grains in a bowl, right? It was, wow. Yeah, flashback time.
Throw in there. And then some months, I do, you know, green smoothies, get your dark green leafies in the morning. Oh,
green smoothies are a great way to give oneself oxalate toxicity, especially if they include raw spinach. Some of the worst cases of kidney stones I've seen, people who've been taking green smoothies.
For the bro bowl, I do fresh mint. I've got a garden full of mint. And anyone who has a garden knows that if you have a little mint, you will have a garden full of mint if you don't do anything. So it's very easy to grow.
You should think about that, right? So what are the toxins in mint that are allowing it to grow at that level? Because of course, you know, in nature, there would be a balance between the food or the plant and the things that eat the plant, right? But this is something you're saying, it takes over the garden, means it has a super successful adaptation strategy, means it probably has pretty strong toxins. I don't know in the case of mint what those toxins are, but probably a good case for not eating it every day if it can keep the bugs away.
And then so the smoothies, I used to do a lot of curly parsley just because it, you know, lasts in the fridge for a long time. It's really nice and deep green, but
parsley is, wow. Now, again, I'm not sure of the exact toxic profile of parsley, but I know that it's extremely toxic, right? I know that you can make yourself sort of throw up if you have too much parsley. So, and too much in the case of parsley isn't a whole lot. So, yeah, there's a reason if you go to cooking school, you use parsley as a garnish. Use it a little bit chopped on top of a dish, usually a dish of meat, as at the end for decoration, right? There's a reason that it's used traditionally like that, and people aren't eating huge amounts of parsley. Like it's just not going to be healthy.
But the broccoli sprout's probably the healthiest food that exists on the planet. Like it's
What would be the evidence for that, right? So I suppose sprouted seeds are less unhealthy than just the raw seeds because some of those anti-nutrients have been broken down, and the plant wants to make sure that its babies, which are the sprouts, can grow and thrive. So in that case, if you have to eat a plant, maybe a sprouted seed is a pretty good choice. But where's the evidence? Like, could you live on just a diet of broccoli seeds? Like, would you have a full amino acid profile? Would you have the essential fatty acids, right? So calling it the healthiest food on the planet seems a bit silly.
hard to imagine. Even like on a nutrition per dollar basis, you make your own, super easy, and it's probably costs about 25 cents a cup or something to make on your own. Just a little mason jar and this screen top. And so but what do you do with broccoli pasta? A little spicy. So look, if I'm making big salads or something, but then I need a lot of produce. I'm out in the boonies. It's hard to get good produce. So I'm doing broccoli smoothies, which sound, of course, disgusting, but
they are disgusting. Just to be clear, they don't just sound that way.
You put a lot of intensely flavored berries and stuff in there.
So here's a food for thought, right? Human taste buds have evolved for a reason, right? So if I eat, for example, what I sometimes eat is some steak tartare, raw meat, basically, with some spices, but sometimes I'm in a rush. I don't have them with any spices. Or what I have almost every day, a raw egg smoothie. It doesn't taste bad to me. It tastes good, right? I don't have to put anything in it. I could sometimes, and sometimes I choose to put vanilla in my smoothie or whatever. Fine, that's my choice. But if I'm in a rush, I have to blend up 5 eggs and eat them and drink them rather. I can, no issues. So if there's something that is so unpalatable that you cannot eat it without putting spices and all kinds of things in there, what is that telling you? Like how would our taste buds have evolved if we couldn't palate the foods that are good for us? Like how would we have survived if we need broccoli sprouts when we know that broccoli sprouts are gross, or our palate tells us that broccoli sprouts are gross?
I use this. One of my favorite snacks is purple sweet potatoes. I microwave them. If I had time, I'd bake them. And that's why I take on planes with me. It's just what a wonderful snack. 70% of the Okinawa Japanese, second longest living population in the world, 70% of the calories from sweet potatoes.
That study is from 1948 or 58, soon after, while Okinawa was recovering from World War II. So during that period, purple sweet potatoes were starvation food, and yes, they were eating a lot of them. But in the period directly prior to that and after that, what were the Okinawans eating? I mean, I'll give you a hint. The motto of the island is pig. We eat everything but the oink, right? That's the model. From what I understand in the Okinawan language, that's how they describe their culture, right? So it's a culture that's centered around the pig. And you want us to believe that 70% of their calories were coming from these tubers under the ground, which were, we know, basically a starvation food. Okay.
Including these purple sweet potatoes may count for part of their longevity, but I can't even get them. I mean, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And so if I live somewhere, I could get them. But then I discovered this, purple sweet potato powder is just one ingredient, powdered sweet potatoes. And so you add that.
Oh my God, man. Why are we turning stuff into powders now? Wow.
This brilliant purple color. And it's such a strong flavor. It kind of can overshadow the broccoli sprouts, so you don't taste it.
Okay. So again, talking about slightly less revolting flavors to overpower the more revolting flavors in the stuff that you think is healthy, because the human palate didn't evolve to tell you what foods you should actually be eating. Okay.
As much. So my life used to be a lot simpler before this new book I have coming out in October, I think October 18th, on lowering LDL cholesterol. So
lowering LDL cholesterol, LDL is not cholesterol, LDL is a lipoprotein. So lipoproteins are exactly what they say. They're proteins that have lipids inside them, and they can be at different sizes. When they first come out of the liver, they're called VLDL. By the way, they can also come out of the gut, in which case they're called a chylomicron. Chylomicron is much bigger than a VLDL. VLDL is much bigger than an IDL, intermediate density lipoprotein. And the LDL is a small form, which stays in the body for some time. There is, again, no good evidence showing that a high amount of LDL in the blood causes heart disease. Let me be very specific about that. There's no evidence showing that high LDL as an isolated biomarker causes heart disease.
The short story is, LDL cholesterol, primary driver, primary killer, heart disease of both men and women.
So again, LDL is not cholesterol, and cholesterol is in every cell of your body, right? Cholesterol is in the cell membrane. So yeah, if you have a war on cholesterol, you have a war on the human body. Let's be absolutely clear here, right?
If there's only one thing you can know about any food, it would be, what does it do to your LDL cholesterol?
Why? Why would we care about that, right? And by the way, the diet is only, and I know this as someone who was trying to reduce my LDL through diet for a long period of time when I was in my vegan vegetarian days. You can only do so much with diet. Most of it is genes, and your body is going to, if you don't eat foods that can be easily turned into cholesterol, then your body's just going to synthesize more from the liver, right? So yeah, there's really, that is certainly not true. What he just said, the most important thing you can know about a food is what it does to your LDL. That is demonstrably not true. There's, if you want to simplify, if someone said, I don't like making such statements, but if someone said the most important thing want to know about a food is the extent to which it raises blood glucose, I would say, yeah, that's a demonstrable fact. That is something we can associate with heart disease. In the high blood sugar causes heart disease, no question about that, right? So through most people who have heart disease also have diabetes. In fact, I would argue almost all people who have heart disease also have diabetes. So anyway, so there certainly are things that we care about more than LDL. In fact, I can't think of much we care about less than LDL.
This is the most important. So, the traditional advice is, well, you cut down on the three main things that increase your cholesterol: saturated fat, trans fats, dietary cholesterol.
How does saturated fat increase LDL? Trans fats are a slightly different story, and trans fats, it depends where the trans fats are coming from. Most trans fats in the diet were coming from industrialized food-like substances like peanut butter and seed oils and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree, we don't want that. But how exactly does saturated fat raise cholesterol? There's a paper I was looking at, maybe I'll put it in on the screen now, that showed that actually palmitic acid, which is the saturated fat, which is thought to be the worst of them, so the saturated fatty acid, which is thought to be the most harmful, and it is harmful in the blood. But what, for other reasons that I won't get into now, but what the study showed was when people were given more palmitic acid to eat, it had no effect on their cholesterol. It had no effect on their LDL. So as far as I understand it, it's not that saturated fat raises LDL. It's that other kinds of fats, especially polyunsaturated fat, can lower, and especially from plant sources, these can lower LDL through the production of something called plant sterols, right? That's right, plant sterols, phytosterols. So, or they look kind of like cholesterol and they get mistaken for cholesterol, but they're not cholesterol. So phytosterols can reduce LDL. That seems pretty clear, and there's an obvious mechanism. I don't think there's an obvious mechanism. I could be wrong here, but I've looked pretty deep into the literature. There's no way through which saturated fat can increase cholesterol. Maybe it does it, but we don't understand the mechanism yet.
Also, minimizing meat, eggs, dairy, and processed junk.
Oh, and what he also said was cholesterol. Now, cholesterol is another story because cholesterol is a big molecule. Cholesterol cannot really pass into the gut, assuming that your gut is functioning and you're not eating lots of wheat and things that are messing up your gut lining. Assuming that you have a functioning and tight junctions in the gut, you're not getting any cholesterol that way at all, right? It's getting broken up into other things. Now, some of it is being reassembled into cholesterol through a process called reesterification on the other side of the gut wall. So that's kind of true what he's saying. I don't know. It's one of those things. What is the New York Times truth rating? I don't know. This is like 20 or 30% true. So if you eat foods with cholesterol, yes, your body will make more cholesterol in the gut. But if you don't eat that, the body's going to make more cholesterol in the liver because the body needs cholesterol. The body needs a lot of cholesterol to synthesize those, whatever it was, 500 billion cells that he mentioned in the beginning. All of those cells have a phospholipid bilayer, and in the phospholipid bilayer is cholesterol. And I've gone into all this in depth now with 2 conversations with Dave Feldman, and probably more, but those 2 are the ones that are coming to mind. So you can check out those conversations on the podcast if you're interested. But short story is, if you eat cholesterol, will you have more cholesterol? Well, you make it easier for the body to put together cholesterol because some of that cholesterol will be broken down and then reesterified and turned back into cholesterol inside the body. None of it is going to pass into the gut, into the body from the gut, because it's just too big a molecule. But if you don't do that, then probably your liver is just going to produce more cholesterol and it's going to balance itself out in the end, right? So, I mean, to give you an example here, I can go on a vegan or a vegetarian ketogenic diet, so high fat, very low carb diet, and my cholesterol or my LDL will stay where it is. In fact, if anything, I can probably make it go up if I'm very serious about limiting the carbs, right? At the moment, my LDL, I think, is 11 point something, 11.2, 11.3. I think that's 450 in US terms. So my LDL is 450, and it would be even higher on a vegan version of my diet. I can pretty much guarantee. In fact, I've done that experiment in the past.
Particularly those tropical oils. And your LDL cholesterol comes down right into that safe range for primary prevention. But the big shift it's probably the biggest shift in terms of primary prevention is this understanding that no longer is there a safe zone. There no longer is there a target for a safe zone. Down to at least like a millimole, which is like, 20.
Wow. I don't know if you guys understand what he's saying, but he's saying basically we want your LDL as low as humanly possible at all times. Wow.
8 or something, like an LDL of 28. Below that, maybe there's no benefit of lowering it, but basically the lower the better.
Wow. So what kind of evidence? Let's, I don't know, pick any hormone you like. Pick, I don't know, estrogen, testosterone, pick thyroid hormone, pick any hormone in the book, anything you want, or any molecule in the body. What kind of evidence would we need to say, no, the body doesn't know what's good for it. We actually need it much lower or much higher. The other way it could be as well than what the body is saying, right? And this is a body that's otherwise healthy, a body that's not having any problem. There's no evidence of heart disease, et cetera, but we want to lower this thing so low that, basically it's physiologically impossible for a human of your age to have anything like that. We want to lower it with drugs. What does that mean exactly? Like, what kind of evidence would you need to be able to make such a conclusion? It's crazy. I mean, again, I can't even think of an example here. Like, if I thought that the ideal thyroid level, let's say a TSH of 2.4 is considered very good. So that's thyroid stimulating hormone that is made in the brain, right? Let's say that I wanted it even lower. So TSH you want sort of lower on the lower side. If you're diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you want it below, I think, 2.5. If you're not diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you can have it as below 4 or 4.5. My numbers may be slightly wrong, but directionally that's correct. Now let's say someone who doesn't have Hashimoto's, but their TSH is 3. Let's say I say, no, this isn't right. I want it down to 1. If someone told you that, what kind of evidence would they need to prove that, and what are the benefits of lowering it that low, right? So potentially dangerous advice here, guys, because Hippocrates is credited with the statement, first do no harm. And that statement implies that the body knows what it's doing. So if the body is producing LDL and cholesterol and all this other stuff at a certain level, barring symptoms, barring any illness, barring problems, we assume the body knows what it's doing. And what he's saying is, no, in the case of LDL, we do not make that assumption. The body doesn't know what it's doing. We want your LDL to be as low as possible.
Better. So all of a sudden, all the international guidelines shifted from having a number like a target of 70 or something, and then you're like under 70. You're like, oh, I'm 69. I'm free. I'm ready to go. I don't have to worry about it.
So I just to be clear here, my LDL is 450, and I'm not worried about it. Why? Because among other reasons, because I get a heart scan from time to time, and my heart scan shows that although 30% of people or 35% of people in my age have some plaquing, some calcified plaques in their arteries. Mine is 0. I have 0 plaques in my arteries. So now I'll keep an eye on that. I don't necessarily trust that. I would keep an eye on that even if my LDL was low, because when we have the information to actually check the heart, why would I care about the LDL? So my advice to anyone who thinks LDL is a big deal is maybe it's a big deal, maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, we don't care about LDL. We care about the heart. And now we have methods, including cheap, non-invasive, very low radiation methods to check the status of the heart. So if you're serious about that, just check your heart. And I, by the way, this is something that people I greatly disagree with on this topic, like Peter Attia. He's advising his patients to do the same thing. He's putting them on lipid-lowering agents, but he's also telling them to go out and get scans because he doesn't trust the LDL literature. He wants to see what's actually going on in the heart. And I think he's got, again, I don't agree with him on most of what he's saying around this topic, but I agree that you need to get scans if you want to talk about heart disease. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time.
Then it's like, oh, well, even people at 69, it actually benefits them to get to 59. And at 59, it benefits to get to 49. And so it's like, oh, God damn it. Why
do I care so much about this? Because when we focus on cholesterol, hyper-focus on cholesterol, pretty much everything else gets worse. Like you can tell from this dude's physique, listen, I don't want to diagnose him. Maybe I shouldn't talk about him in particular. But when I was vegan, I know I had too much liver fat. I know I was suffering from things that look like skinny fat. Eventually, I got to fat, right? Because the things that are lowering if we take the another hypothesis, so there's the lipid heart hypothesis, which is what he's a believer in. There's also the lipid energy model. To some extent, these could both be true, but I don't believe the lipid heart hypothesis. That's a different story. But the lipid energy model basically says that the reason that you have the high LDL is because you're using you're fat adapted. You're using the fat from all over your body to fuel your muscles, to fuel your brain, to fuel everything. You're using fats and ketones. Now, when you're not fat adapted, what are you doing? You're using glucose. And when you're using glucose, you're probably consuming too much glucose. That glucose, as I just mentioned, cannot be stored in the muscles or the liver. There's very limited stores there. So it gets converted into fat. And where does that conversion take place? In the liver. And so where's the fat most likely to accumulate, especially if you're like me and you're not, some folks can get big, they can get like huge, and they can put on these layers of subcutaneous fat. People of my genetics cannot. So we get fatty liver even though we look thin. Again, I don't want to diagnose this dude, but I would suggest he get a scan and see what kind of liver fat he's looking at, right? Because it's not zero. So anyway, some thought there. The reason that I get really worked up about the cholesterol thing is you can't make any progress. It's very unlikely you're going to make any progress if you're hyper-focused on cholesterol. Because the things you need to do to lower your cholesterol are going to make everything else worse. They're going to make you more sugar dependent. They're going to make you more likely to get Alzheimer's disease, et cetera, et cetera.
Then we got to get our LDL low. And so, I mean, the only reason everybody isn't on drugs instead of just 100 million Americans is because there's downsides. There's risk.
Some of us wouldn't. Listen, at the end of the day, if you believe in freedom, you believe in bodily autonomy, right? So in other words, what I put into my body is my business. There was a discussion around putting statins in the drinking water like 20, 30 years ago, which is a crazy discussion, right? You can't force people to have stuff that is, that they may not want, right? So he's going to talk about the side effects, which is fine, but bodily autonomy is still a thing, right? People can decide what medicines to take and what not to take, right?
Increasing risk of diabetes on these drugs. So
the diabetes risk is probably why I never really got tempted, even in my vegan vegetarian days, because even at that stage, I understood that actually diabetes is probably the biggest risk factor by orders of magnitude. I suppose like if you're doing, I don't know, if you're doing long distance running, or maybe if you're like flying airplanes at Mach 2, weird stuff happens to the blood vessels. Like there's very weird cases, unusual cases where things could be more dangerous than diabetes. But at the population level, diabetes is the most dangerous thing for the heart by far. So if this drug is supposed to improve my heart and gives me diabetes, now I'm wondering what the hell, is there a net loss here? What's going on here? Just never made sense to me.
At a certain level of heart disease risk, then it's worth to have the increased diabetes risk.
So who decides what that level is? Assuming that what you say is true, which I don't necessarily believe it's true, who can make that who can make that judgment? Who can say when the risk will outweigh the reward?
Because I think diabetes is like killer number 6 and heart disease is killer number 1. But you don't put everybody on it.
Diabetes is killer number 6, but diabetes is associated with all of the, and not associated, causes all of the top, not all. So there's accidents is number 3 or number 4. But if you're talking about cancer, right? If you're diabetic, I think you're 3 times greater risk of cancer. If you're talking about heart disease, again, the odds ratio is I think 8 or 10x more for diabetics. And if you have heart disease and you're not diagnosed with diabetes, I think you need to get a better diagnosis, because pretty much all of that is metabolic dysfunction, except things like the overtraining, the running stuff that we discussed, maybe the being in an airplane going at hypersonic speeds and stuff. Like, I don't know. There's weird stuff that may be outliers. But at the population level, if you have heart disease, the chances that you have metabolic dysfunction, which would eventually take you towards diabetes, is very, very, very high.
Until their heart disease risk gets to a point where you're like, okay, I'll accept the diabetes risk and all the other potential risks. But if there was some thing that didn't have downsides, like if there was a food you could eat that lowered your cholesterol.
So everything has a downside, right? Everything is the question. The question for all of us is, does the risk of the intervention outweigh the reward? For example, exercise, right? If I go to the gym, there's a risk associated with that. Especially if I haven't been going to the gym, I can pull a muscle. I can, I don't know, hit myself in the head with a weight or something. Like the risk is not zero. However, for the vast majority of people, if you're young and healthy, relatively young, relatively healthy, et cetera, the reward, which is that you're going to do a better job with your diabetes risks, et cetera, better job with metabolic functioning overall, the reward outweighs the risk for the gym for 99% of people, right? I won't say for 100 because nothing's 100%, right? So in that context, changing your diet, especially changing to a diet that is not proven to be safe in humans, because it's only been possible in the age of supplementation. Let's be very clear. Before the synthesis of B12, even the people who were preaching veganism weren't vegans. Seventh-day Adventists, etc. They were not vegans. They were eating some, and you can go and read the memoirs of whoever it is, Ellen G. White, and so on. She would have some animal foods, no question about it, right? Because she knew that she needed to stay healthy. So it's only in the very modern period that we can even talk about this, and therefore that makes this an extremely potentially dangerous intervention. You have to prove to me that it's safe before I recommend it to my clients or myself, right?
The healthy food. Well, then we should all be incorporating that into our diet, since the lower the better. And so this,
if you believe that it's lower the better. So again, you have to believe that your body doesn't know what it's doing, right? And to me, that's a very dangerous. But once you start going down that rabbit hole, it's like, what are you going to be supplementing? You're going to be supplementing testosterone. You're going to be supplementing, I don't know, aldosterone. Like you're going to be doing all kinds of funny things, thinking that you're chasing optimal levels of stuff that you don't know the answer to, because you're not smart. Your body is way smarter than you are. Your body knows how much LDL it needs way better than you are, or at least that's the default hypothesis. If you think that's not true, you're going to have to show me some pretty strong evidence that your body is stupid.
that was the rationale behind the formation of the portfolio diet in 2000. Was it, I think 2003, a long time ago. Dr. James Jenkins, University of Toronto, said, okay, let's do a plant-based diet, eliminate all things that raise cholesterol, then go out of our way to add foods that specifically pull cholesterol from our body.
Why would you want to do that, right? Because if you pull cholesterol from the body, you're basically, and I saw this with myself, you're basically putting your body in a constant state of taxation, right? So you're eating the oats, which is pulling cholesterol from your body, true, but then you're making the liver work harder to produce the LDL, to produce what it needs, because your body can't survive without that. So you're putting a kind of strain on your metabolism, on your system, on your whole physicality, in order to chase a number that you think is optimal when your body doesn't necessarily think that, right? Your body's you're working against your body instead of with your body. And that's like the worst, as someone who's concerned about first principles and healing, like that is like the worst thing you could possibly be doing. Introducing things that make your body work harder. Very dangerous.
So like, this viscous fiber foods, the slimy fiber, the ground flax seeds, oatmeal, okra, eggplant, this kind of slimy foods have a...
So look up when humans started eating all of those foods, right? I'm offhand, I don't know all of them, but we're talking about in the last couple thousand years, right? Mostly. Maybe 10,000 years for some of them, like oats. No. Oats were not really common. I did a video on oats recently. Oats were not really commonly eaten until the 17th century. And they were eaten by the Celts, by Scots in particular, because they were persecuted by Romans, right? So in other words, it was a survival food. It was a starvation food. You're going to have to do a lot of work to prove to me that these things are potentially healthy.
Special kind of fiber, sticky fiber, that pulls cholesterol out of our body. And so eating not just plant-based diet, but a plant-based diet with a lot of viscous fiber, get even lower cholesterol. Oh my God. So that was one. And so we came up at the time, found four foods or food groups that pull cholesterol out, and for each from a different mechanism. So they added up. They had an additive effect. And so it's called the portfolio diet.
This is just so bad. I can't watch any more of this. So what he's discussing is so dangerous. What he's saying is that there are several mechanisms by which we can tax the human body to reduce its cholesterol level. And by the way, the second you stop doing that, and I know this again from experience, the second you stop eating the, God knows what that was, oats and okra and whatever he mentioned, your cholesterol is going to bounce back up, and it's going to bounce back up higher because your body needed that, right? Your body needed that cholesterol for various purposes, or that LDL, right? So we need to be very clear here about, and why I get so, people accuse me of being fanatical. I don't think I'm fanatical, except that I'm fanatical about human health. And I'm fanatical that our genes have not changed for tens of thousands of years, but our diet has, right? So in that context, now our diet has changed in different ways to different extents in different regions, et cetera, and there's cultures and there's diets that we adopted in the last, couple thousand years that may or may not be fine for most people. Fine. All that aside, why this hyper focus on cholesterol? The answer is it's the only thing that the vegans have. Their diet, and I can go back to the study done by, I'm forgetting his name, Dr. Christopher out of Stanford, who did the vegan twins, Christopher Gardner. Dr. Christopher Gardner, who did the vegan twin study, he did something called the A to Z or the A to Z study, where he looked at Atkins, Zone, Ornish, and a control diet, right? And he found that the Atkins diet, which was that low carb, high meat diet, was the best on every metric except for cholesterol, where the vegan diet did better, right? The Dean Ornish diet, right? So since that time, and this was done more than 10 years ago, I think it's getting close to 20 years ago, the late 2000s, I want to say like 2007, 2008. Since that time, the vegans have just been so hyper-focused on cholesterol because they know that's the only argument that they have from a health perspective. And I don't think it holds much water. I think that, if we ask ourselves what this means, we have to ask ourselves, what if you're advancing a hypothesis, where is the burden of proof? And what I'm going to say is that the burden of, I don't need to prove that humans will thrive on an ancestrally appropriate diet, because that's the default hypothesis. I don't even need to prove that diet was hyper-carnivorous anymore, because we have nitrogen isotope analysis from the long bones of humans living, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 years ago, which shows that they were all hyper-carnivorous. They were all eating 70 to 80% meat plus, right? So in that context, I don't need to prove my hypothesis, but they need to prove their hypothesis. Because why do I not need to prove my hypothesis? Because the default diet for an animal will be the diet that the animal evolved to eat on. So if you're saying something else, then you got to go show me a lot of evidence. And we have, and that evidence needs to be pretty watertight. And we have data sets. Again, you can go back and look at those interviews I did with Dave Feldman on this channel, and look for his stuff all over the internet. It's all out there. He's doing a study showing that LDL does not correlate with plaquing in subjects who are eating a low carb diet, right? So is this meant to apply to a general population? No, unless the general population is actually eating an ancestrally appropriate low carb diet, which is of course what we'd like to see. So if you are eating an ancestrally appropriate low carb diet, do you need to be worried about LDL? I'm not here to tell you what to worry about and what not to worry about. But at the end of the day, I believe that the body knows better than you, right? If you're worried about heart disease, get a scan. Yeah, thanks. And if you listen to this guy, what are you doing, man? Like, seriously, like, there are way better vegans to listen to. Not that I'm a fan of any of them, but there are vegans who are actually making coherent arguments that are backed by science, that we can have a genuine debate, and maybe I'll agree with them on certain things. This guy's not one of them. This guy is totally, I don't know what path he's lost on, but he's just doesn't make any sense. So thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one.